The glass slipped before he could breathe. Her whisper, barely louder than the hum of the restaurant, froze him in place. "Sir, that's my dad's signature." And in that instant, his entire world collapsed. Would you recognize a connection if fate placed it right in front of you? Comment below if you've ever felt that unexplainable pull toward a stranger who felt oddly familiar. The evening glowed gold inside Sterling and Company. Lounge, the kind of place where silver forks clinked softly and secrets whispered over red wine. The scent of roasted rosemary chicken mingled with faint truffle oil and the low, soothing hum of a live jazz band. Lila moved through the aisles like she'd been born to navigate chaos. Trays balanced, hair tied neatly beneath a simple black cap, her tired smile never wavered. It had been 12 hours since she'd clocked in, 4 hours since her last break, and yet she still carried herself with quiet grace. "Hi, my beautiful family. I have missed you all. Missed all the experiences we've had together. It's been a rough ride as we're currently battling some technical issues, but trust me, we're getting everything back and running. So stick around. I need your support now more than ever. Thank you for sticking around with me. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. "Table 6 needs another bottle of Merlot," whispered Mia, the other waitress. Lila nodded, pushing through the kitchen doors where heat and noise collided. Inside, steam rose in ribbons, the smell of butter and garlic filling the air. Chef Marco barked instructions in Italian as Lila retrieved the bottle from the counter. Her fingers brushed the label, Sterling Reserve, 1998, and something about that name made her pause. She couldn't say why. Maybe it was the way the word Sterling carried weight, like a memory half buried under time. She brushed it off. Another shift, another customer, another night where exhaustion was the only thing that stayed. Out on the floor, her gaze swept across the dining hall. Then she saw him. At the far corner table, a man sat alone. Mid-50s. Perfectly pressed charcoal suit. Sharp jawline softened by age. He held himself like someone who owned the silence around him. His name, Richard Sterling, was etched in elegant silver on the reservation stand. He didn't eat much. Didn't smile either. His eyes were distant, lost somewhere far away. Every so often, he'd glance at his watch, check his phone, then sigh. Lila approached quietly. "Good evening, sir. Would you like me to pour the next glass?" He didn't look up at first. His voice was deep, practiced, steady. "Yes, thank you." When he finally did look at her, something flickered behind his calm gray eyes. He studied her for a moment, too long to be polite, too short to be called familiarity. "Have we met?" he asked suddenly. Lila blinked, startled. "No, sir. I don't think so." He smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "You remind me of someone I used to know." She didn't know how to respond, so she offered a polite nod and turned away. Back in the kitchen, her heart beat faster for reasons she couldn't name. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was the ache that came every time someone mentioned familiarity, a word she'd spent her life chasing but never truly feeling. Lila had never known her father. Her mother, Caroline, used to tell her bedtime stories about him. How he loved music, how his handwriting looped with elegance, how he promised he'd come back. But he never did. When her mother passed 2 years ago, Lila had nothing left but a box of keepsakes. A few photos, a locket, and a letter with a single signature at the bottom. R.S. She didn't even know what the initials stood for. Only that her mother's last words were, "He wanted to come back." Something stopped him. Sometimes, in the quiet hours between shifts, Lila would stare at that signature, at the graceful curve of the letters, and wonder what kind of man could love and leave so completely. Now, as she moved past table 6, balancing the bottle of Sterling Reserve, she didn't see the man watching her, Richard's eyes following her like he was trying to remember something he'd forgotten years ago. He'd built his empire from nothing. Sterling Global, a name that opened doors worldwide. He'd been called ruthless, visionary, unstoppable. But none of those titles filled the silence that waited for him in his penthouse each night. Because 24 years ago, Richard had walked away from the only woman who ever made him feel human. He had his reasons: career, family pressure, reputation, but none of them mattered now. Every success since had been built over a hollow space he could never quite fill. And tonight, staring at the waitress who looked just like Caroline, that emptiness stirred again. "Excuse me," he said softly when Lila returned to pour the wine. She froze mid-motion. "Yes, sir." "Where did you learn to speak that way? You have an accent, faintly southern." Lila smiled. "Maybe. My mom was from Georgia. I grew up there before moving here for college." He nodded, lips parting slightly as though tasting the memory of her mother's voice in her own. Then the silence stretched, heavy but not uncomfortable. When she turned to leave, a document slipped slightly from his leather briefcase, landing near her feet. She bent down to pick it up, a contract bearing the Sterling Global logo. As she did, her eyes caught the signature at the bottom. She didn't realize she'd stopped breathing until her chest hurt. 2 simple letters. A loop, a flourish. The exact same shape she'd memorized from her mother's keepsake box. RS. Her hands trembled. Her vision blurred for half a second. Logic whispered that it couldn't be real, but her heart whispered otherwise. "Sir," she said, her voice catching like a fragile thread. He looked up. "That's my dad's signature." The room went silent. The soft music stopped meaning anything. For one suspended moment, the world hung between 2 heartbeats. The glass slipped from Richard's fingers and shattered across the floor. Lila stood frozen, wine pooling at her feet, the sound echoing louder than it should have. He looked at her like a ghost had just spoken his name. Neither of them said another word. If you were in Richard's shoes, faced with a ghost from your past, would you tell the truth right away or hide it to protect them? Let me know what you'd do in the comments. The glass hit the marble floor and burst into fragments, tiny diamonds scattering under candlelight. Every conversation in the restaurant fell silent. Lila froze, her pulse thundering in her ears. She could feel every pair of eyes on her, but all she saw was his face, pale, stunned, disbelieving. "I'm so sorry, sir," she started, instinctively reaching for a napkin. But Richard didn't move. His gaze was locked on her, wide and hollow. "What did you just say?" Her voice trembled. "I said, that's my dad's signature." The air between them thickened, heavy with something that neither could name. "Where did you see that signature before?" His voice came low, unsteady. Lila hesitated. She could feel her co-workers watching from the edge of the room, whispering nervously. Mia gave her a worried look from the bar, mouthing, "Are you okay?" Lila swallowed hard and forced a shaky smile. It's nothing, sir. I just thought it looked familiar." She bent down to pick up the glass pieces, trying to steady her hands. "Don't," Richard said quietly. The tone wasn't commanding, it was broken. Like a plea. She froze. He rose from his chair slowly, the noise of fabric against leather sounding louder than it should have. The restaurant manager started toward them, but Richard lifted a hand, silencing him. He crouched down to help her gather the shards, their fingers almost touching as both reached for the same piece. Her heart skipped. He whispered, almost to himself, "You said, your dad's signature." Lila nodded slightly. "Yeah. My mom kept an old letter from him. He signed it the same way, RS. She said his name was Richard, but she never told me his last name." His throat tightened. "What was your mother's name?" "Caroline," she said softly. And just like that, time stopped again. The sound of her name hit him like a gust of memory. Caroline's laughter, the scent of rain on her hair, the promise he made and broke 24 years ago. He felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Richard straightened abruptly, his voice trembling. "Excuse me." He turned and walked out toward the balcony that overlooked the city. Lila stood there, torn between duty and instinct, watching him disappear through the glass doors. Her manager approached. "Lila, what happened? Are you okay?" She blinked, realizing she was shaking. I don't know. Take a few minutes, yeah?" Mia whispered, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Lila nodded and followed Richard outside. The evening air was cold, carrying the scent of rain and car exhaust from the street below. Richard stood at the railing, staring at the skyline, his hands gripping the metal as if anchoring himself to reality. She approached slowly. "I'm sorry if I said something wrong, sir." He didn't answer right away. "Your mother, Caroline?" "Yes." He exhaled sharply, like he'd been holding his breath for years. "I knew her. A long time ago." Lila's heart stuttered. "You knew her?" He nodded. "We worked together. She was the kindest person I ever met." For a moment, the night hummed with quiet recognition. "She used to talk about a man she loved," Lila said cautiously. "Said he was brilliant. That he promised he'd come back after something happened. But he never did." He turned to face her then, eyes glistening in the city's glow. "Lila, I—" She stepped back slightly. "Wait, how do you know my name?" His mouth parted, but no sound came out. For the first time in years, Richard Sterling, CEO of a billion-dollar empire, couldn't find words. "It's embroidered," he finally said weakly, gesturing to her name tag. Her breath caught. She almost laughed, partly in disbelief, partly in discomfort. He gave a sad smile. "You look just like her." Lila's eyes softened. "Everyone says that." A pause. Only the wind spoke between them. "Do you ever think about him?" he asked quietly. "My father," she whispered. "Every day. But I stopped being angry a long time ago. I guess some people just don't stay." Her words sank into him like stones into water. He turned back toward the skyline, blinking hard. The lights blurred. "Sometimes we think walking away protects the people we love. But it only destroys us both." She tilted her head, sensing something deeper behind his tone. "You sound like you know that from experience." Richard smiled faintly, brokenly. "Maybe I do." They stood there a while longer, two strangers connected by invisible threads. Inside, life resumed, clinking plates, laughter, the slow hum of jazz. But outside, time felt different. Finally, Lila sighed. "I should get back to work." He nodded without looking at her. "Lila." She paused. "If you have that letter," he said carefully, "could I see it sometime?" She blinked. "Why?" He hesitated. "Because I think I might know more about your father than you think." Her eyes widened. "You knew him?" He swallowed hard. "Something like that." Confusion flooded her expression, but before she could ask more, a coworker called her name from inside. "I have to go," she murmured. He nodded slowly. "Of course." As she walked away, her mind spun with questions. And as Richard watched her disappear through the glass doors, his reflection stared back at him, a man haunted by the one truth he could no longer deny. He whispered into the night, voice breaking, "I found you, Caroline, but too late." That night, Lila lay awake in her small apartment above a laundromat. The letter sat on her nightstand, the old ink faded but still legible. "My dearest Caroline, I'll come back for you and our little one. I promise." Her thumb traced the signature, R.S., and she felt the same unease stir in her chest. At the same moment, across the city, Richard sat alone in his penthouse, staring at an old photo he'd kept hidden in his drawer, a young woman with soft eyes, holding a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. He whispered the name he'd never spoken aloud before. "Lila." If you were Lila, would you have followed him that night, or waited to see if he'd come back with the truth? Tell me in the comments. The next morning came gray and heavy, with rain streaking down the restaurant windows. Lila stood by the espresso machine, staring into the steam, her mind far from the present. The memory of last night replayed in fragments. The glass, the signature, the way Richard had looked at her like he'd seen a ghost. Mia's voice snapped her out of it. "Earth to Lila. You've been foaming that milk for 5 minutes." "Oh," Lila muttered, setting the pitcher down. "Sorry. You sure you're okay?" Lila hesitated, then whispered, "You ever feel like the universe is trying to tell you something?" Mia smirked. "Always. Usually it's telling me to quit this job." But Lila didn't laugh. Her hand brushed against the letter in her apron pocket, the one she'd taken to work, as if proximity could solve a mystery. When she turned, she froze. Richard Sterling stood in the doorway. He wasn't supposed to be there. Not at this hour, not on a rainy weekday morning, and definitely not in casual clothes. a navy sweater, dark jeans, no tie, no armor. The air shifted instantly. Even the manager, who'd been scolding a busboy, went silent. "Mr. Sterling," the man stammered, "we, weren't expecting—" Richard waved him off. His eyes were locked on Lila. "I just wanted a coffee," he said, voice calm, but his expression said otherwise. Lila's pulse quickened. She glanced toward the counter, forcing professionalism into her voice. "Would you like a table, sir?" He hesitated. "Actually, I was hoping you'd join me for a few minutes. If you're on break." Every head in the cafe turned. Lila's cheeks flushed. Sure. Just give me a minute." Mia whispered as Lila passed. "Girl, that man is either going to tip you a car or ruin your life." Lila managed a weak laugh, though her heart thudded hard against her ribs. They sat in a quiet corner booth, away from the crowd. Rain pattered against the window, tracing tiny rivers down the glass. Richard wrapped his hands around his coffee cup like he needed its warmth to speak. "I didn't mean to frighten you last night," he began softly. "I just wasn't prepared for what you said." "It's okay," Lila said. "I shouldn't have said anything. I just—" "You recognized something." She nodded. "It was the signature. My mom showed it to me 100 times. I thought I was imagining things." His eyes softened. "You weren't." The words sank into her like stones. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, taking a slow breath. "Your mother and I knew each other. Many years ago. She worked for my company, in marketing. She was brilliant. And kind. I loved her." Lila's heart skipped. "You loved her?" He nodded. "More than I should have. I was engaged at the time, to someone my family approved of. My relationship with Caroline, it was complicated. And when she became pregnant, I was too much of a coward to face what that meant." Silence filled the space between them. Lila's hand tightened around her cup. "So you just left?" He closed his eyes. "I told myself I was protecting her, that if anyone found out, her life would be ruined. But the truth is, I was protecting my reputation. And I lost both of you because of it." The cafe's hum faded away until there was only the sound of rain and two hearts breaking quietly. Lila blinked hard. "You're saying you're him?" He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw it. The same gray eyes she saw in the mirror every morning. The same nervous smile her mother used to describe. He didn't need to say it. Her chair scraped backward as she stood, trembling. No. No. My dad was a good man. He wanted to come back. He promised." Richard's voice broke. "Lila, I did want to. I looked for you years later, but Caroline moved, changed her number, left no trace. I thought you were gone. She died thinking you forgot her." Lila cried. Heads turned, but she didn't care. "Do you have any idea what that did to her? What that did to me?" He stood too, his composure crumbling. "Every night, I saw her face when I closed my eyes. Every success I built meant nothing without her. Without you." Tears blurred her vision. "Why now? Why come here? Why break all of this open again?" "Because fate gave me a second chance," he said quietly. "And I won't waste it this time." The manager appeared, anxious. "Is everything all right here?" Lila wiped her face quickly. "Yes, we're fine." Richard straightened his jacket, his voice firm but kind. "I'm sorry for the disturbance. Miss Parker and I were just catching up." "Miss Parker," the manager repeated, startled. "Lila Parker?" Richard's expression flickered. "Yes." The man nodded quickly. "Of course, sir. Take all the time you need." When the manager left, Lila's anger softened, replaced by confusion. "You knew my name." "I've known it since last night," he admitted. "After you left, I couldn't sleep. I called an old contact from Human Resources, asked him to find out what became of Caroline's family. He found your record." Lila shook her head, struggling to process. "So now what? You show up, drop this bomb, and what? Apologize over coffee." Richard's voice cracked. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to see you, to tell you that your mother was right. I wanted to come back. I just didn't know how." Her tears fell freely now. "You can't just show up and fix 20 years of silence, Richard." He winced at the name. Richard, not Dad. "I know," he whispered. "But I want to try." Silence settled again. Outside, the rain eased to a soft drizzle. Lila stared out the window, the city lights shimmering through raindrops like broken stars. Finally, she said, "Do you still have the photo?" He blinked. "What photo?" "The one my mom kept of you, holding me when I was a baby. She said she tore it in half when you left." Richard's voice was hoarse. "Yes, I have the other half." Lila turned to him slowly. "Bring it tomorrow." He nodded, relief flickering through pain. "I will." She stood, placing a few bills on the table even though she didn't owe anything. "I have to finish my shift." He rose too. "Lila." She stopped him with a raised hand. "Don't say anything else tonight. If you mean what you said, come tomorrow." He nodded once, the weight of his entire past pressing down on him. "Tomorrow." She walked away before the tears returned. That night, as thunder rolled in the distance, Lila opened her mother's box again. She placed the faded letter beside her cup of tea and whispered, "He's real, Mom. He's really him." And across the city, Richard sat on his bed holding an old photograph, half torn, edges faded, of Caroline smiling with a baby in her arms. For the first time in years, he whispered a prayer. "Let her forgive me." If someone from your past suddenly returned seeking forgiveness, would you let them explain, or shut the door to protect your heart? Share your thoughts in the comments. The next evening came with a storm. Rain lashed against the restaurant windows in sheets, lightning illuminating the skyline like cracks in the night. Lila stood at the hostess stand, twisting her apron string, her pulse racing. She told herself he wouldn't come, that maybe fate would show mercy and let the past stay buried. But deep down she knew. Some truths don't stay quiet. At exactly 8 p.m., he walked in. Richard Sterling, umbrella dripping, eyes determined, clutching a small envelope in one trembling hand. He looked less like a billionaire tonight and more like a man stripped bare. "Lila," he said softly. She nodded, her expression unreadable. "Do you have it?" He held up the envelope. "Yes." "Come with me." They walked to the same corner booth from yesterday, the same seat where his world had cracked open. Only this time, neither looked away. When they sat, she folded her arms tightly. "Show me." Richard placed the envelope between them. He slid out an old, torn photograph, edges yellowed, colors faded. One half showed a young woman holding a baby, her smile radiant. The other half, his half, showed a man's arm wrapped protectively around them. When Lila joined the two halves together, the picture became whole again for the first time in over 20 years. She gasped softly. "It's real." He nodded, tears already gathering. "You were just a few months old when I left. I never stopped looking for you after Caroline moved." Lila's eyes glistened. "Then why didn't you find us?" He hesitated, then opened the folder that lay beneath the photo. "Because someone didn't want me to." He handed her several papers, old company letters, memos, and one in particular marked confidential. "I had enemies, Lila. People who thought a scandal would ruin the company. When Caroline refused to end the pregnancy, they made sure I lost everything if I stayed with her. They forced me overseas for years." She looked up sharply. "And you just let them... You let them win." His voice cracked. "I thought I could rebuild first, fix the damage, then come back stronger. But by the time I returned, she was gone." Tears streaked down her cheeks. "She waited, you know. Every birthday, she baked a cake with your name on it. Every year she said, 'He'll come home.' And when she got sick," Lila's voice broke, "she still said you'd walk through that door." Richard bowed his head. "I deserve her hatred." "She's gone," Lila whispered. "You don't get to have it now." The words sliced through him, sharp and true. He wiped his face roughly. "You're right. I don't deserve anything. But I want you to know, not a day passed that I didn't think of her, or of you. When I saw you last week, I thought I was seeing Caroline again." Lila exhaled shakily. I wanted to hate you, but all I could think was, I finally found the part of me I never knew. Richard's eyes softened. You have her heart, her courage. She smiled weakly through her tears. And your handwriting. They both laughed, a fragile, trembling laugh that carried 20 years of pain and longing. But the laughter faded as quickly as it came. Richard reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers. Lila, I know I can't fix the past. But if you'll let me, I want to be here now. Not as a CEO. Not as a man who ran away. Just as your father. Lila stared at his hand. The rain outside softened to a drizzle, as though the world itself held its breath. Finally, she placed her hand in his. Then start by proving it, she said quietly. Not with money. Not with gifts. Just be here. He nodded, voice trembling. I promise. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was healing. Later that night, after closing, Lila stood by the window as Richard waited for her under his umbrella. She hesitated, then joined him, her small frame tucked beneath his arm. They walked to the corner where the rain fell lighter, passing neon lights reflected in puddles. Your mom used to love the rain, he murmured. Lila smiled faintly. She said it was heaven's way of giving the earth a second chance. He looked at her. Do you believe in second chances? She met his eyes. I didn't. Until now. They stopped at a crosswalk, the city stretching endlessly before them. The light turned green, and for the first time, they stepped forward together. Back in his penthouse that night, Richard placed the rejoined photograph inside a frame on his desk. Beside it, he laid a new letter, the words trembling but certain. To my daughter, I can't change the years we lost. But I'll spend the rest of mine proving that love can still find its way home. Dad. When he sealed it, he didn't sign R.S., he signed it fully, Richard Sterling. That same night, Lila opened her mother's box again. This time, she placed the two halves of the photo inside and whispered, We found him, Mom. Her tears fell onto the old paper, softening the ink, but this time, the tears weren't bitter. They were peace. If forgiveness meant reopening an old wound, would you do I? Spring arrived quietly that year. The city thawed from its winter chill, and with it, something inside Lila thawed too. It had been 3 months since that night in the restaurant. 3 months since she'd learned the truth about who she was, and who he'd been all along. Now, as she stood before the glass doors of Sterling Enterprises, her reflection looked different. The same girl, same uniform, but steadier somehow, like she'd found her place in the world, even if the path to it had been messy. The receptionist smiled warmly. Miss Parker, he's expecting you. Lila nodded. Thank you. Her heels clicked across the marble floor as she entered the elevator. The walls gleamed, her heartbeat echoed. When the doors opened at the top floor, sunlight poured in through towering windows, painting gold streaks across polished wood. Richard Sterling stood by the window, back turned, hands clasped behind him. He turned when she spoke softly. You wanted to see me, Dad? That word, Dad, still hit him like grace. His smile trembled. Always. He gestured toward the desk, where a small box sat waiting. I wanted to give you something, he said. Lila opened it carefully. Inside was a delicate gold locket. She gasped when she saw the tiny photo inside, her mother on one side, baby Lila on the other. The back was engraved, Family is the choice we keep making. Her eyes welled. It's beautiful. I had it made from your mother's wedding band, he said quietly. I thought it should be yours. She traced the metal with trembling fingers. She would have loved this. He nodded. I hope she's watching. I've spent years building empires, but nothing feels as meaningful as hearing you call me Dad. She smiled through tears. You earned it. Slowly, but you did. He chuckled softly. Patience never was your mother's strong suit. Seems you inherited that too. Lila laughed, a sound so free it filled the office with warmth. They sat together on the couch, watching the skyline. The air between them felt different now, lighter, healed. Richard turned serious. Lila, there's something else I wanted to talk to you about. She glanced up, curious. I've been reviewing the mentorship program at the company. We help young people from disadvantaged backgrounds get access to training and college support. I want to expand it. And I want you to run it." Her eyes widened. "Me? You've lived that struggle. You know what it feels like to start with nothing and still show up every day. You'd be perfect." Tears threatened again. "Dad, that's—" He stopped her gently. "No charity. You earned this. You've been doing the hard work your whole life. It's time someone recognized it." She nodded slowly, her voice trembling. "I'll do it. But only if we name it after Mom." His eyes glistened. "The Caroline Parker Foundation." They said the name together, and the room felt holy for a moment, as though time itself bowed its head in respect. That afternoon, Richard took her to his private art gallery, quiet, filled with light. On one wall hung portraits of leaders, inventors, and changemakers. But at the very end of the hall was a new piece, a painting of a woman and a baby in soft pastel hues. Lila stopped short. "That's her." He nodded. "Commissioned it from an artist in Italy. I wanted her here, watching over everything. Over us." Lila reached out, fingers grazing the brushstrokes. "She looks happy." "She is," he whispered. "Because her story isn't just tragedy anymore. It's continuation." As weeks passed, life settled into a rhythm. They had dinners together, shared stories of Caroline, argued playfully about business ethics and coffee preferences. Sometimes they cried, sometimes they laughed until their ribs hurt. But the silence between them, once filled with regret, now held peace. One Sunday, they visited her mother's grave together. The sun was gentle, the breeze soft. Lila knelt, placing fresh tulips by the headstone. "Mom," she said softly, "you were right. He did come back. Just a little late." Richard stood beside her, eyes closed. "I never stopped loving you, Caroline. Thank you for giving me the best part of my life, twice." Lila reached up and took his hand. "Come on, Dad. Let's go home." He smiled. "Home. I like the sound of that." That evening, they returned to the restaurant where it all began. The same corner booth. The same golden light spilling through the windows. The staff greeted them with knowing smiles. As they sat, Lila said softly, "It's strange being back here." He smiled. "The night that changed everything." She nodded. "You dropped your glass, remember?" He laughed. "Hard to forget." She leaned forward. "You know, when I said, 'That's my dad's signature,' I thought it was impossible. But I think a part of me wanted it to be true." He reached across the table, his hand warm over hers. "And I think a part of me was waiting for you to say it." They shared a quiet moment as the city's hum surrounded them, a soft symphony of life moving on. Later, as they walked out into the evening glow, Lila looked up at the skyline and said, "You know, I used to believe people couldn't change. That if someone hurt you once, they'd always hurt you again." Richard looked at her, eyes kind. "And now?" She smiled. "Now I believe people can surprise you, if they're brave enough to face their truth." He nodded, pride and emotion thick in his voice. "You sound like your mother." "I'll take that as the highest compliment." They stopped at the curb as the city lights shimmered above. Lila slipped her arm through his, resting her head lightly on his shoulder. And for the first time, neither of them looked back. What would you do if the person who hurt you most finally asked for forgiveness? Would you give them another chance? Share your thoughts below. Your story might be the reminder someone else needs tonight. Sometimes, forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it rewrites it. If this story touched you, leave it in the comments and tell us. Do you believe love can find its way home, no matter how long it takes? Because somewhere out there, someone's still waiting for their chance to say, "I'm sorry." The end.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one. Thank you.